backwards. Good tackle there from Finn Smith.
Basically, two guys pulled up in these big Range Rovers and said, this is kind of the situation, like the club hasn't paid rent on this place for a couple of months and sorry, but like there's a chance you might have to not live here next month if this continues. You're listening to the England Rugby Podcast, O2 Inside Line. I'm Finn Smith. My name's Finn Smith. I play for Northampton Saints and England. I play fly half, which is number 10, often takes on the responsibilities of most of the kicking. I'd say all the best fly halves, they think very fast. They see and process information about what the opposition are doing and make decisions based off the back of that very quickly. They're calm, they have a lot of pressure moments, and often the opposition will target them and try and ruffle some feathers and things like that. But yeah, I'd always say the best fly halves have those traits, and then on top of that, you've got to be comfortable bossing 14 guys around the pitch, often some of those far more experienced than yourself. Growing up, I was rugby mad, like we were in a sports household. So me and my brother would fight and play sports and do that from light till dark pretty much, all day, every day. But yeah, I loved sport, I loved being outside, loved messing around. My older brother Angus, he is now 25, I'm 23, so we're similar in age. I always was wherever he was, I wanted to be there. I remember when he first started training at my local rugby club as an under 6, I went down and joined as a 4-year-old and sort of played around with him and followed him around there. But yeah, I was a pretty goofy, just light-hearted kid, I'd say. I was good at school, I'd say. Like, I worked really hard. They'd probably say I was a bit like cheeky and like messed around a bit, but like always took my schoolwork very seriously and stuff. So tried to sort of push that balance from, chatting and messing around in class. But then when it came to, exams and whatnot, I'd be working pretty hard. I had one detention from my whole time at school, which is a decent record, and I was annoyed about it when I left school and I got that one detention. Rugby in my family sort of starts with my granddad, Tom Elliott. Unfortunately, never got to meet him because he passed away with MND before I was born, but he played for Galashiels, Scotland and the British Lions, so that was pretty cool. And you know what it's like as a kid, like that is the coolest granddad you can ever have, right? Like I was like obsessed with everything that he had, whether it's memorabilia or stories about him or cutouts in the paper and stuff like that. So yeah, like massively looked up to him and wanted to be like him. From the back of that, my mum's married my dad, and my dad was rugby mad as well. It pains me to say it, but a massive Scotland rugby fan, like travels all over the place. All growing up, he'd be at games at Murrayfield in his kilt and stuff like that, and that combined with my mum's side of things was led for a pretty rugby mad family. I think it's hard to grow up in a household like that and me and my brother not be obsessed with it. And then I was obsessed with tennis as a child, like played maybe 20-30 hours a week of tennis. Used to get up at sort of 5-6 a.m. before primary school and go and play, and then we'd leave at lunch, go and play, train after school. Shout out to my mum for being the best driver on the planet. She used to take me all over to tournaments and stuff, sometimes stay away for the night. I'd say from age maybe 10 to 11, I actually stopped playing rugby, and I was like, look, I'm going to go all in on playing tennis. I was always a terrible loser, sort of smacking my racket, sulking, screaming, crying, all of that sort of stuff. It was sort of instilled from me from a pretty young age. I was a pretty sore loser. I think those experiences like toughen you up a lot and drip down into why I'm as competitive as I am now. I think I'm a lot more relaxed now, but I say deep down, it's that competitive edge is still in me. It's probably something that I try and bring out more and more, and the more I sort of talk to sports psychs or head coaches and stuff, they're like, yeah, go back to that place. One of them actually said to me, go back to you as a 9-year-old on the tennis court when you were crying and screaming and shouting and hated losing, because that's you at your sort of rawest form and when you were at your best. So yeah, it's interesting, but I guess there's still a lot of that little kid in me to this day, When I first signed for Worcester, yeah, it was unreal. It was cool, and I think the fact that I sort of had gone to that club when I was 13 and they'd spent so much time and effort in me, and I'd sort of gone through that whole process, and you're always looking up to the first team. Something that really stood out to me when I was, I think, 14 and sort of joined the academy at first. They do a big presentation, and I remember sitting in the room next to my mum, and they sort of talk about how, we're one of 2,000 kids that might be right at the bottom, and then they've got this triangle that goes up and up and up, and it's under 16s, under 18s and all of this, and then signing a contract at the top, and it was something like out of 2,000 kids there's 2 or 3, and I literally remember me and my mum having a conversation like, heck, that doesn't fill you with much hope. Why do you bother? Which actually, funnily enough, was exactly what that graph was in my head as I was signing my first contract. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. That we're one of those 2 or 3 right at the top of the triangle. But yeah, like in terms of signing, it was sort of during COVID that this was all coming out. So we went into a meeting and then they were like, look, we want to sign you to become a professional player. And me and my parents all left, waited for the lift doors to shut. And then sort of as they did, we all started like jumping up and down, hugging each other. It was the first time I think they'd sort of seen me show any sort of emotion and things like that. But that was amazing. And then just sort of, from a rugby mad 4-year-old that I've just been telling you about to now being my job, like you can only imagine sort of how cool that was for me, going to work every day and getting to train and be around it and watch videos of rugby and learn and ask from all these great players. Like that's not a job for me, do you know what I mean? Like that was just all I'd ever wanted to do. So that was really cool, and I think, like I said, the affiliation I had from what they'd done for me since I was 12, 13 sort of made playing for that team all the more cool. I started to know that financially things weren't looking great for Worcester. There was often sort of like payments coming through a day or two late, so you're like monthly pay slips, which, to be fair, when we were told, oh, that's just processing errors, you'd be like, yeah, I sort of can see how that might happen. And then there was a day when the bailiffs turned up at the club asking to take the watt bikes. Boys were rehabbing, doing a session on there, which I thought was like, wow, that's a bit strange. And then I was in a 13-man academy house, which was interesting, but it was a good laugh. And we had a knock on the door the same day that happened. Basically, 2 guys pulled up in these big Range Rovers and said, oh, this is kind of the situation, like the club hasn't paid rent on this place for a couple of months, and sorry, but like there's a chance you might have to not live here next month if this continues, which is a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds. Do you know what I mean? That didn't really hit me. I was a bit like, oh, that's weird, but like I'm sure the club will just sort it out. And then the more and more of these stories you start hearing coming out, the more you're like, that's rogue. And then it was sort of getting drip fed through and through. Like every day it would be, oh, someone's wanting to get straps and there's like, oh, we haven't got any tape anymore because the budget's gone down. Or the next day it was like a big meeting about where we're at with medical insurance. So sort of saying like, if you all want to play, you might not be covered for these sort of career-ending injuries and stuff. And then that whole sort of process then spiraled pretty quickly within maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I remember a few times being really taken aback seeing like my teammates who might have been 28, 29, 30 crying over the situation. One of them I remember getting super emotional saying, oh, I've got like a family and I can't pay the mortgage for me and my child to live in a house and all this stuff. And I was like, flipping heck, like I'm lucky in a sense that I don't have any of this responsibility, could sort of move back in with my parents and stuff. But I remember thinking like, wow, this is pretty real for some guys. And there was a bit of a vote that went on about, do we play or do we not play? It was quite logical, you'd say, for a lot of the senior players that play every week in the Prem to be like, yeah, let's not, in case you get an injury and stuff. And then actually one of the sort of younger academy boys stood up and was like, I've not played professional rugby yet for the club. If I don't get the chance to show myself in the shop window, like I'm probably not going to get picked up by anyone. Like this is going to be my career done. So I was like, from that point of view, this is really serious. Like I was fortunate to have played a few times for the club and was fairly confident things were going to be all right. But that was pretty eye-opening. These people like really having to face the truth of like, yeah, probably not going to be able to play rugby anymore. It's probably still not sunk in to this day, to be honest. I guess it's amazing to see them back in the league. Like that's so cool, and I'll definitely be supporting and keeping an eye out for them. And never say never, one day might be back wearing the shirt. But I was surprised to see, like, even throughout this season, there was quite a few games I played for Northampton or England where sort of after the game you'd be doing a lap and there'd be 20, 30 Worcester fans sat in kit, still sort of waving flags and stuff, because they were like, look, if we don't do this, everyone will just forget about us. And they sort of still have a real like love for the guys that played for the club. So it's just a strange situation. Yeah, it's great to see them back, is what I'd say. My breakthrough was a fairly just like steady one, like sort of followed the same sort of process, I'd say, that a lot of guys do. Breakthrough, start playing fairly well in the Prem, get called up for a couple of camps, maybe wait a year or so to earn your stripes and be that guy that's training and preparing the team for a little while. And then I think it was through an injury to Marcus that I got to go to make my debut against Italy, which is pretty cool. And then sort of coming through this season, we had the Autumn Nations and we didn't get the best results. And I remember being frustrated because I was like, when the team's not performing super well, you're like, oh, maybe they'll change things. And every week I was thinking they'll change things. And then the following Six Nations was on the bench against Ireland, and we had a decent performance. We didn't get the result. And then I remember Steve sort of saying, look, you're going to start your first game for England against France. And at the time I was like, flipping heck, like it was a pressure game. We hadn't had the best autumn. We'd lost quite a lot of games that year. And I remember literally 2 hours after I'd done the meeting with Steve and he said, you're going to play, I went and did media and they were like, oh, you were like, if you lose this is England's worst run in a long time. Like that people are saying about getting sacked and the team changing and all of this stuff. And I remember just being like, very brave of him to be picking me for this, but was buzzing that he trusted me to do it. And I was actually super relaxed about it all because I think I'd sort of manifested it in my head and been wanting that moment so much for the last 2 years of being in camp and being a bit frustrated with things. And then to answer your question about the proudest day I've had in an England shirt, like that would be it, I'd say. Sort of facing one of the best teams in the world in France, feeling like I gave a good account of myself. And what more I was proud of is I didn't start the game particularly well and sort of stuck in it and just kept going and battling away and fighting away. And the last 25 minutes of that game I felt like was some of the best rugby I've played in a long time. We ended up winning with, like, you can't beat it. We scored in the last 79th minute and then kicked the conversion to put us 1 point ahead. Still, like, my favourite moment of my whole career so far is when Mitch passed that ball back to me as the clock had just gone red and I kicked it off. I remember being stood there after kicking that ball off at the end and literally Allianz Stadium like shaking, and I could feel it going through my whole body and everyone like just going mad because I think the team was in a bit of a tough spot. The media were giving us a pretty tough time, but we still felt we were owed a lot more. So I think just like the relief of the whole group, like getting that done, made that so special. So yeah, I think that would be my proudest moment. That was a pretty cool day. The beauty of playing 10 is you win and you get a lot of credit. You feel like the man. I'd imagine Marcus and George and all the other fly halves would say the same. Like there's an element of playing 10 where you enjoy feeling like the man and being in control and having a big influence over the result. But then obviously the other side of it comes if you lose, even if you might have played well, you still hold a large burden of why that might be. So yeah, I think the older I'm getting, the more I'm getting good at sort of just trying to stay sort of neutral, control what I can control. Like I used to be bad for sort of searching my name into stuff and Googling and seeing what people thought of how I was doing and whether I should be playing or not. But the older I get, I sort of, you realise that doesn't actually matter too much. Luckily for us, the type of characters all of us are, it's the same with Fordy and same with Marcus, and I'd like to think they'd say the same about me. Like we all genuinely just want to win, and whether that's being the guy that's preparing the two that are playing, whether that's being on the bench and preparing the guy starting, or whether that's being the starter and sort of steering the ship that week. I think we all luckily just want to win. But that being said, those two are two of the most competitive people I've ever met. And like whenever we're going 15v15, we always want to be on the side that's doing better and having the better touches and stuff like that. That's just part of it. And that's great for the team. That's great for us as players. I think it's great that we all get on though. There's no element of not sharing information. I think we could have done this better, or often one of them will say to me, I think you could have done this better and stuff. And I think to have that from my point of view, from two of the best fly halves in the world is like, this is amazing. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm really lucky to have those two guys. Growing up, we were a Scottish rugby household. You look up to your parents, they wanted you to support Scotland, they wanted you to cheer for Scotland, and I was always sort of a bit on the fence about like, I was born in England, I've lived in England all my life, all my mates support England, and I sort of was be a little bit neutral around that, like was unsure. And then I think I got to about 14, 15, as I sort of started playing for Worcester and playing in that league, I was like, well, actually, the guys you look up to all play for England, and you wanted to be like them. So yeah, I think when the decision came around, it was an easy enough decision, not like an absolute foregone conclusion, because, you care about what your parents think. And, I had a conversation with my dad that lasted an hour maybe about like sort of what did he think about it all. And he was sort of from a viewpoint of, he said, oh, first and foremost, you're my son. I want you to do whatever you want to do. I'm proud of you. Regardless, follow your dreams, etc. Because I was sort of saying, look, I think I'm going to go and join up with England because I think it's the right thing for me. I'm English, all of this stuff. And he was like, I'm not going to hide it from you. Like, seeing you in a Scotland shirt would add another 1% of proudness to what I would already have, which I was like, yeah, fair enough. Like, I completely understand that. I didn't really know how it would go, to be honest. Obviously, after he said, like, yeah, do whatever you want, like, you're English, I was sort of like, of course that's what he'd say. But in the same time, like, I wanted that to be a conversation that he knew that I took seriously and respected his views and his opinions and his emotions like a lot. Same with my mum, same with my brother, same with all my cousins and aunties and uncles and grandparents. Like I wanted them to know that as much as I was following what I wanted to do, I still very much had thought about them and where I'd come from and my sort of heritage and paid that respect when I was making the decision. So as much as it wasn't like a super intense conversation, like I wanted it to have a sort of emotional feel around it, so they knew that I was sort of, caring for them and showing them respect with the decision I was making. But yeah, like they've been great around it all. I still sometimes have a laugh with him when I stuck the finger up at him when we beat Scotland in the Calcutta Cup this year. But yeah, it's banter, do you know what I mean? Like I'm his son, he's my dad. There's nothing in that at all. Sometimes see him at games and I've managed to just about get him to sing the English national anthem, and I always stare to check he's doing it whenever we're singing it before a game. But he started doing that, which is great. He still won't wear any kit, but I'm working on that. I'm sure we'll get there.
I'm Andrew Smith and I am Finn's dad. Everything for him was a competition, and maybe that's some of the traits that you see in him now. He was super active. We loved our sport, so there was always sort of plenty of sport around. He got into it from a really, really young age. He was always, I guess, one of the better players in the team. But it was probably not until he got to sixth form that you could see actually there's something here and there's a real opportunity to make a career out of it if that's what you want to do. And then you get into a situation where interest from two countries, so the country of his birth, England, and the country of our birth, Scotland. So they were both very keen and eventually made his choice to go with England. From an emotional point of view, for me as a proud Scot, that was initially a little bit tricky to take, but at the end of the day, we were always very, very clear with him that, it's your career fit and it's your decision. You've got to do what feels right for you. And when you stand back and rationalize it, then absolutely, I completely get why he made that choice. And at the end of the day, we couldn't be prouder. Finn's first international encounters with Scotland. So he got some time off the bench up at Murrayfield last year, but that was quite special, seeing him play at Murrayfield. And then we wind on to Six Nations earlier this year, where I think it was Finn's second start at fly half. That was a big day for us as a family. It was amazing. I mean, it's a strange feeling in a way. Ultimately, we just wanted him to succeed, him and his team. That was a really special moment. And Finn's worked really hard to get to where he's got to. He deserves all the success he's had to date. It's still obviously a long career ahead for him. Hopefully, both of us are just really proud of the fact that despite playing on a big stage, he's still a really grounded, humble guy.
It's funny, isn't it? You couldn't have really written that would have happened. Like, imagine you told me as a 10-year-old that was going to be the case, kicking a penalty for England to beat Scotland. It was just funny. Like, that whole week was funny. Like, it's just the build-up of it all. I remember getting asked so much around it. I got so many messages saying like, "Oh, you're Scottish, like do us a favour this weekend," stuff like that. I had some of my cousins down and they all turned up in Scotland shirts, so I was a bit like, that's hilarious. It was an emotional, just like super joyous day for the family. Like, I think it's just cool for all of my relatives on that side of the family to see me playing in a Calcutta Cup against Scotland for England. Like, it just had a real nice sort of fuzzy feeling around the day, and for it to end like that for me was, it made it all the more sweeter. So that was cool. The day the Lions squad was announced, that was a fun day. The way that it's done just makes it so much more raw, doesn't it? But like it did mean a lot to me. Everyone always pretends like, we'll see what happens. But like you had been thinking about it. For me, probably after the Six Nations, like it was bizarre because until then, I'd come off the bench, I think it was 3 or 4 times for England. And then the Six Nation comes and all of a sudden you sort of hear your name getting put in conversations and people are asking you like, oh, you know, do you think you're going to go? Or people are saying, I think you're going to go. And then you're like, oh God, all of a sudden I'd be pretty disappointed if I didn't. And the way it all came out, I remember being sat with a load of the lads. I'm sure you might have seen the clip of it, sort of when it got announced and everyone sort of jumping up and down. And I got to do the same for Pollock and Tommy and Mitch, which was like, it's just fun. Like those guys are genuinely some of my best mates. And then I remember getting told and genuinely like, I'm not a really emotional guy, but I just like burst into tears. I was just like so excited, went outside, called my parents straight away and literally just held the camera in front of my face and cried. And they did the same pretty much. And then we hung up and then they said, oh, by the way, we meant to say like, well done. Because we were literally just all bawling our eyes out. Obviously I was able to emulate my granddad by playing for the Lions. One of the big drivers for me, if I ever was going to think about playing for Scotland, was to sort of emulate him and follow in his footsteps. So to be able to now finally do that and sort of share the same, like we've both got a Lions cap number, like that to me is just so cool. He's got a cap that I used to sit and put on as a kid, and now I've got my own one. Like that to me is just like, you can't beat that. Like that is so special. That made it all more emotional. I had a phone call with my granny that night, but I always used to grow up asking her about him and stuff. And I remember sort of saying to her like, oh, do you think Granddad would be super proud of this? And she was like, yeah, like you wouldn't imagine. That almost meant more to me than any of the stuff that came with it.
Finn Smith back, gets the call to go to the sky. And that call is the right call because England have found the try.
I'm Finn Baxter. I play for Harlequins and England Rugby. I describe Finn Smith as cheeky almost. On the pitch, he's clear. It's what I like about him. He's not panicking at any point. He knows what's going on and communicates that really clearly, and he's a brilliant motivator as well.
I'm Henry Pollock and I play for England Rugby and Northampton Saints. How I describe Finn Smith, the intensity that he plays at is something that I'm so kind of fortunate to be able to play with him. The detail in the week that he goes to around who we're playing and little fix-ups in training and the kind of stuff that no one sees is world-class, and he's a world-class player, and I can't wait to see where he goes this year. Off the pitch, Finn he's just pretty chill, to be fair. Yeah, he's a great mate and yeah, pretty cool bloke.
English voices being heard. Finn Smith takes England into the 20s.
In the heat of the battle, when something's not going my way, like we always talk about, you go red or blue. Red is like angry and just wanting to kill everything, and blue is kind of inside yourself and in your shell. Like I would probably go more towards the blue way, and like if stuff wasn't going my way early in my career, I used to go quite quiet and look up at the clock and think like, all right, we've only got 20 minutes left, like that's all good. And actually it wasn't until I got a little bit older and started speaking to a sports psychologist and stuff that actually is when that whole thing around, you know, think about you playing in the garden with your brother and trying to just like find that and get to that state where I'm angry, but me now is quite relaxed. So I get to like a decent midpoint is what I try to do anyway. But it all sort of boils down to trusting everything you've practiced and trusting the process and stuff so that you can go out there and just play what's in front of you and it feel like you're just playing the game with your mates. Honestly, I thought sports psychology was a complete farce. Like I thought it was a waste of time. I thought it was just what people said to try and, you know, sound intellectual and whatnot. And then I jumped on a call with a lady called Andrea First, who'd been recommended to me through the club. She sort of asked me a load of questions about my family and my background and all this stuff I was saying about tennis and being rugby mad and loving sport. And I was like, oh, this is a waste of time, like what's going on? And then after about an hour of doing all of this, she was like, you love rugby so much, you're obsessed with it, it's your life to some degree, that actually by the time you get to games, you're quite often burnt out and, you know, a small something goes wrong and it's like, it feels like the end of the world for you. So a lot of what followed that was actually, you know, the next 6 weeks block was me basically trying to learn how to switch off properly and not think about the game when it wasn't going to be helpful, so that when I got to games, the battery was full and I was ready to go. And even if something bad happened, it was just like, oh, well, I found that whole process fascinating. And then genuinely, that was at the start of the season, we won the league and I wasn't very happy with how I performed for the first 4 games. And I spoke to her for 4 weeks following that and then went on to win the league. I was voted Players Player of the Season in the Prem that year, got my first cap, and I didn't do anything different day to day apart from just think about what went on between the ears. I remember just being fascinating by that and pretty like, geez, I need to put some real time and effort into, you know, how I'm thinking about all this stuff. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Being actually convinced that it wasn't just a waste of time, and being a pupil of it myself was a pretty fascinating journey.
My name is Andrea First. I worked a little bit with Finn as his sports psychologist when he was embarking on starting his international career with England. My first impressions of Finn were, for a young man, he was incredibly driven, incredibly competitive, incredibly outcome-oriented, and he wanted some strategies to deal with that, you know, expectation that he had of himself, as well as the pressure that was building up from within and from the outside as well. He's quite a fiery, competitive character, and I think that's such a strength of his. And how do we then use that to then make sure we're not creating issues for yourself out there because you're wanting it so badly that then you can't see a way forward and you're losing minutes and minutes of gains. So definitely that resetting piece. Off the back of those two, it was learning how to switch off away from the pitch. Some of the results early on that he experienced were realising that he was actually losing his competitive edge by letting the red mist take over. Him just feeling better about himself, you know, not feeling on edge the whole time and feeling like he can switch off and recover and see that as part of a performance mindset rather than see it as a potential weakness or not working hard enough. Because of the nature of his determination and his ability to take responsibility, I think he will go as far as he so desires. He's still very young. He's put his hand up, worked really hard. So that puts him in good stead to take him wherever he wants to go.
So I'm studying economics and mathematical sciences at the Open University. I'm in year 5 of 6 at the minute. So yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, they've let me sort of do it at half speed, which is good. I wanted to do that because, like I said, at school, I was a bit of a goody two-shoes. Like, I studied really hard without blowing smoke on my own arse. I got all A stars at GCSE, all A stars at A-level. Like, I was a fairly intellectual kid and wanted to go on and have like a really good job and sort of invest really hard into that and have a good career. And then obviously rugby sort of was running alongside that, and I'd never really considered, you know, that I might go professional in that until I was pretty much in my last year of school. And then when I signed for Worcester, I remember being like, right, can I go to university and come back and do this part-time? And they were like, no, we think you've got a high ceiling, like we think you could play pretty quickly, so we don't want you to do that. So I was like, right, well, in that case, I'm gonna have to find something I can do online. And luckily, Open Uni was that. I wouldn't say I've loved it, because, you know, the last thing you want to do when you get home from training is log on and read about interest rates and things like that, or learn algebraic formulas. But it's been good, and it'll be something that I'm glad that I've done when I stopped playing, because, you know, I still would love to go into sort of that financy world and go and work in the city and get stuck into all of that. So when people say like, oh, tell me a bit about yourself, like, I often think like, outside of just loving rugby and playing rugby, there's not loads that I can make myself sound interesting and try and dress up. So I've always got that I tell people, and they're quite impressed. And, you know, like, there's been weeks where I've had a big maths exam that is my whole year's dependent on, and then 2 days later we've played a Prem final. Or last year it was the exact same. I had a big exam, and then 3 days later we played in the European Cup final. So in times like that, without me wanting to do it and sit down at a desk, it's actually maybe just taking my mind off that and being a good tool for sort of just putting my mind elsewhere and not stressing too much about the game coming up. Coming up next on England Rugby Podcast, O2 Inside Line.
If I've had a bad day, it's because I spent too much time on social media. Too much of it, I actually find I'm in an awful mood and have a bad day.